Anna, how are you?
Good. How are you?
What's up? Look at that. First time on and on first. Love it.
I was really nervous about it.
Yeah, every time, I'm not going to lie, I just cross my fingers that we no technical errors. So, all
Awesome.
right, there we go. We got Kevin.
What's up? How are you?
Whoa, professional. Wow.
You got me nervous with like a good mic yesterday, so
It's like there might be like an investor or two of yours in the crowd. Wow. Awesome, man. Awesome. How are you doing today, guys? Good?
I'm good.
Oh, there goes Kevin. See,
Feeling
there's a
good.
technical glitch. Kevin, if you could hear us, just get back on. However you can.
I'm back.
All right, let's just give Kunal a minute or two. Quick question. You guys have a drink by any chance?
Like water?
I'm 5 months pregnant, so I'm drinking water.
That was a silly question. Yeah. I feel like the networking events now are very like clean. You just have a nice glass of water in front of you, right?
Yeah, it's perfect time to be pregnant and at home. I'm not missing out on anything.
Can't do anything. All right. We got Carolyn trying to pop on, but that shouldn't happen. Let me just text Kunal real quick. So we're gonna give everyone a couple minutes to get on. We'll kick off at like couple minutes before like 5:35. So
Nice.
we'll just sit here awkwardly. See, Kevin, remember when I had the music going the first time and I got yelled at?
It was a nice touch.
If you're out there, man, we're gonna have to bring the music back at the beginning. Just eases everyone into the moment a little bit.
Maybe a little subtle like jock jams. Get people excited.
Pump everyone up.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, just get everyone going real quick. All right. Everyone, welcome to our first event. There's some polls over on the right-hand side. If you want to answer them, just try to get a feel for who's in the audience, what they're thinking right now, what everyone's feeling, how we're doing. I didn't ask the Travis poll last time how everyone's feeling right now. That one was it was right in the middle of quarantine, Brianna, and it was like the answer was like not great, okay, fine. So we'll try to keep it a little more positive here today. And if you want to introduce yourself, everyone on the right-hand side in the chat bar, the panelists can see your chats. Hopefully we'll have some time for questions at the end of the panel, but if not, we're going to have 2 breakout rooms in the end, and we will be open for questions there because everyone attending will have the opportunity to jump on camera too, if you'd like, or you could just ask your questions in the chat. And there is Kunal. Look at that.
Easy peasy.
Oh, 4 in under 4 minutes. That is the most seamless transition we've ever had on.
Sorry about being a few minutes late, guys.
The UN ran an event on Hopin the other week, so I felt pretty confident that like we could at least make something happen on it, right?
Yeah. Hold on. Hi, everyone.
So, welcome everyone out there in the audience. This is our first installment of Building the Modern Revenue Team. My name's Chris Gannon. I'm the founder of Captivate Talent. This event is in association with the Addicted to Growth Show podcast, which you could find on Spotify or iTunes, which Kevin Mulrain is the co-host of with Travis King. So if you want to learn more of the knowledge, our goal is to kind of mirror some of the guests that they've had on that show onto this event and kind of create more and more content and knowledge out there for everyone in the sales, revenue, and venture community. So this first installment, it's on scaling and hiring. And I have 3 awesome guests who I've worked with in the past that I know have built teams, helped grown teams, and give advice on hiring and scaling. And I've all talked to myself around it. So without further ado, how about you guys introduce yourself? Kevin, you're in my bottom, so maybe you should start. We'll go around from there.
Sure thing. So this is really cool. So Chris, thanks for having me on this. I'm excited to be a part of it. But Yeah, so I've been in sales for about 15 years now, in leadership roles for about 10, I've kind of found my niche or my what excites me and my passion is getting into organizations with either no sales teams, very few sales reps, 5 to 10 million in ARR, and building process and foundations to allow them to scale and grow. And so I'm very process oriented, very data driven, but I think the thing that I'm most passionate about really is people and watch them develop. So when you asked me to be a part of this and speak to it on the heels of a lot of our conversations, was really eager and excited to join. So thanks again for having me.
Awesome. One fun fact though, real quick. Come on.
So a fun fact. So a lot of people actually don't believe me on this one. So I have to usually call a few people, which I won't do right now. But through a friend of mine, he ends up being friends with a lot of players on the St. Louis Rams. And at the time, their quarterback, and I'm going to throw out, if you'll guess this one, Chris, but he didn't have a very strong arm and he was very injury ridden all the time.
Ooh, St. Louis Rams. Jared got no.
Before that,
you're talking to a Packers fan, man. We play the Rams like once every 4 years.
So anyway, we got into a we got into a throwing competition and who could throw further, and I was able to throw much further than he did. So it's my fun fact is that I was able to outthrow an NFL quarterback.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
If anyone can guess that out in the chat, I'd really like to know who it is without coming. Brianna, you want to go next? Little introduction?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Brianna Rizzo, and I head up the talent team at Stripes. We are a growth equity firm based in New York, currently working from Westchester with a Disney background. That's kind of, I guess, my fun fact is I met my husband on a plane and knew he was the one when we both bonded about our very Disney-esque childhoods. So at Stripes, we invest in both consumer and tech brands. So everything from pet food and bakeries and restaurants, e-commerce, beauty, to data analytics, software, tech tools, healthcare, fintech. And Kevin is actually running account management and sales and all kinds of other things that they throw at him at one of our investments at Global Web Index. So I work across the entire portfolio. We have 29 active investments, and I work across the portfolio to help build the talent strategies alongside all of our amazing executive teams.
Awesome. And Kunal?
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here, and to Chris and the Captivate team for having me. I'm really honored to get that tap about being on a panel over here and sharing experiences and talking to this wonderful crowd, and Brianna and Kevin as well today. So just a quick intro from my side. I've been over my 20-year career, I've worked in many types of roles, including product and customer success and account management, so more of a sales function. But I'm really passionate about building a fantastic customer experience and while helping deliver and focus on significant growth for the business. I'm currently the senior director of account management at JobVite, which is an applicant tracking platform and end-to-end talent acquisition platform focused on recruitment, marketing, and processing candidates. And I run a business of around $40 million in portfolio across about 1,400 customers. And I have a small but a great army behind me to help me with that. I'm super excited to continue the discussion today. So happy to be here.
We call it a scrappy team, right? In the startup world, scrappy army. And Kunal,
never had one of those.
Fun fact.
Fun fact. All right, so mine's probably not as cool or as fun as Brian is there. To be totally honest, as Kevin and Brian is there, but mine's a little what I'd call dorky. I had this hilarious. In college, I had my best friend. His mom used to just like take amazing care of me and him whenever we'd go back to their house in Chicago, and she'd always do my laundry for me. So, which is absolutely amazing when you're in college, right? Have a mom who does laundry that's not your own mom. That's pretty wild, especially college laundry. Jeez. So she used to safety pin my socks together, which is how. And I've since carried that with me over the past 25 years, or that's a little long, 20 years, to safety pin my socks together.
All right.
So if I don't have matching socks on.
Your laundry room never has the missing sock then. That must be pretty amazing.
I will always only lose a pair of socks.
That's pretty cool. That's a good fun fact. Right?
Yeah, it's not bad.
There you go. Well, a little bit of an agenda tonight. Our panel is going to run till about 6:15, so we'll have a half-hour session. Then we'll have a bit of networking. If anybody's on this platform for the first time, I implore you to try the networking. It's really fun, and after a couple months of being locked in our apartments and houses, it's really nice to meet other people outside of our own social groups. And then we're going to go into 2 separate breakout rooms. One breakout room with Kunal and I is going to be around building a hiring process and how to evaluate talent. And then the other one's going to be with Brianna and Kevin about best practices for onboarding, performance management. Once we get those people in there, how do we retain them? And then just a little bit of an introduction before we get into the questions. We're doing an event on scaling and hiring in an economic downturn, and we're doing it for a reason. Kevin made a really good post the other week that got us talking about this, is if you can go back and rethink all those hires that maybe didn't work out or how you hired for the wrong attributes, how would you do it over? So our hope is to instill knowledge into the crowd where how do we go about doing this better next time we hit this time of hypergrowth and rapidly scaling and growing? So for the first question I'll throw out there, panelists, talk to me about a time where you've been helping build, scale, or hire a team or advising a company on scaling and hiring. Just give me a little bit of a story, some tidbit on your backgrounds about that.
I can jump in. So at the time we're coming into our investments, it's right at that hypergrowth phase. So we come in right around Series B when there's that true product market fit. You have a strong brand, you have a team, you're not the 5 people in a garage anymore, and you're really, going to market with something special and unique. So we're coming in right around the size of like 30 million, 40, 50 million in revenue, taking it to the next level. And that's always that inflection point where you start noticing people who got you there from day one might not be the people that take you to the next level. And it's the hardest conversation. And founders, recognize that they see it in themselves, even that they might not be the right people in the chairs, and having to kind of work through, hey, I'm a founding CTO and I see someone, I just met someone who could actually do this a lot better. And how do I kind of navigate that? So a lot of what we try to do, sort of having those aha moments, get just great A+ people in front of the executive team early to help them see a reflection of where they could go. If you hire the right team, being able to point to certain companies and being able to actually think through, like, this is what I want to be when I grow up. That's actually an easier conversation than an investor coming in and saying, you're not the person, like, we got to replace you. And so being able to build that trust and have those conversations, I think, is really helpful. So what we try to do is, even if we have an inkling that there's an opportunity to hire a stronger leader in a role and build out a new function or a new area of a team, we try to get the CEO or the executive team in front of someone that we think is great. And maybe they're not even recruitable, but they have an example of now what A+ looks like. And I think that helps set the calibration of what an exceptional candidate looks like and where you can hire, and allows you to have that conversation of, like, if you're in hyper growth and you want to hit the pause button and really think thoughtfully about where you want to end up, just having some of those examples to draw from initially and then building around those sort of pillars is where we typically start.
Yeah. And Kevin, to flip that now to you, you've managed a team. How big was the team you managed that GDS, or you grew out there? Like, it was pretty big, right?
Yeah, probably when I left, it was a little over 150 people.
And you helped scale that office, right, from the ground up, or?
I mean, I wouldn't say not from the ground up necessarily, but from about 40 or so people.
So you've hired about, even early on in your career, you hired about 100 people.
Yeah. Like and you constantly learn, right? Like, I think that's the interesting thing. It's I look back on my entire career, you've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of salespeople. You've hired, a portion of that, of course, but yeah, you're constantly learning and evolving in terms of what that profile looks like. There's so many variables, right? Like the stage, the resources, the support. So there is a lot that goes into it. And Chris, I think to your point, what I know you and I've talked a lot about, it's like, you may not be hiring a ton right now, but this is the time to get everything straight, everything organized, right? To really do a look back and figure out, do we have the right candidate profile? Do we have the right process? Do we have the right scorecard? Or are we aligned? Because, I'm sure we've all been there before, but there's going to be times where it's like, oh, we've got this number to chase, go, go, go. Let's get the people in. And that's not when you want to be figuring these things out. You want to be figuring these things out when you can really dedicate time and focus to it.
Interesting. And Kunal, your experience too. I mean, when I met you, you worked at one of the leanest startups I have ever seen. So I'm sure every time you hired one person, they had to be like I know they had to be the perfect fit, because I helped you hire one or two of those people. So it wasn't easy. So what about your experience around hiring and scaling?
Yeah, and actually, I'll piggyback on what Brianna and Kevin said a little bit there, right? Where you have to kind of know what you really before you are hiring for, and sometimes that means you need to hire for the skills you don't have, right? What Brianna said, and maybe not to the extent of Series B and scaling up from 100 to 400 people, but so I ran account management and customer success for a 30-person startup for about 6 years, and I joined the team pre-revenue as the first employee, what we needed to hire for was actually skills. We didn't need to hire for job descriptions, right? Job descriptions are really tough. I've hired a financial analyst to be a customer success manager for a recruitment technology platform. Like, does not match, right? However, what was the skill that I needed? I really needed someone to crunch numbers and build reports to show the value of our platform to the customer, so that the customer would buy more and stay with us for longer, right? So I recognize in myself that I'm no financial analyst. Okay, I'm pretty good with Excel spreadsheets, but not as good as this person was. I think we continuously did that. So we really, had that early stage reflection of understanding what skills we were missing and looking for pockets of people that might have those skills and would be interested in a transition and capitalize on that transition. So at the time, we were really lucky too. A lot of financial services folks, and this is 7-8 years ago, they didn't really want to be in financial services. There was a lot of problems in the industry, and fintech was cool, but not a lot of fintech companies 7-8 years ago. Not nearly as many as there are now. So we went the skills route and really, really made a pointed decision to focus on that and let the leaders dictate the plan numbers.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I think so few hiring teams sit down before they go out to market for a role and identify skills. They usually just carbon copy like a job description that's out online somewhere,
right,
and then shoot it to somebody and say, hey, we need this. And then they don't know what they're evaluating sometimes. Brian, I wanted to kind of direct a question about candidate experience, because now that it's a client-driven market, or hiring a market for companies that are hiring, do you think candidate experience is important, especially being in a portfolio of companies that are consumer-facing so often?
100%. I mean, I tell candidates all the time, like, how you're treated along the journey of being recruited to the company is a reflection of how you're going to be treated in the culture, the day-to-day. So that candidate experience starts day one. The second that you apply, and even really before you apply, what you read about the company beforehand, how they show up when in response to cultural events and movements, how they show up and support their employees. That all happens before someone even might apply, right? And so thinking through like all of those candidate touch points, how are you reaching that candidate it's the candidate experience is marketing. And just like an authentic consumer can sniff out, BS in a marketing headline, a candidate can sniff that out in an employee experience. And so making sure you're showing up in an authentic way is so important, especially because right now, like, we are our most authentic selves in this moment in time, working from home. Like, in the first 30 seconds that, like, I'm a pretty, like, happy-go-lucky person with, like, Beauty and the Beast and, like, Mrs. Potts in the background, right? Like, I'm going to attract a certain vibe for my own, employer brand. And so I think, being at home where you're comfortable and you're showing up in your own skin every day, that says something. And we all have different non-negotiables at this point too, because we've been at home, we're with our families more, we're seeing what we value and what we'll stand for. And I think being able to understand that candidates' experiences have changed now, and we have to adapt to that and adapt to their true selves at home, it's going to result in better hires, to be honest. You get to cut through so much of the stuff. We're seeing a lot of our companies hire faster because they can cut through the culture fit, culture add pretty fast because they're meeting people as their true selves initially. I think also, like, every touch point with the candidate experience, like, it's how you show up, and did you attach the NDA in a DocuSign versus a PDF. Like, those little things add up to be big things. And so if you can show any way that, your team is detail oriented, nothing falls through the cracks, those are really important things. Sending, just like a candidate should send a follow-up email, the team should respond and engage too, right? Like, you want every single person who comes through your door to want that job, regardless if they're a fit or not. So you want them leaving your grounds or Zoom saying, I want to work at XYZ company. This is the best company ever. All of these people, showed such engagement. They asked me great questions. It was conversational. They made me think, they challenged me. I want to work there, regardless if they're a fit. Like, that's the best sort of compliment, you can have, is the person wanting the job no matter what.
Kevin, Kunal, to add on that, have you guys consciously thought about candidate experience previously or now, or ever had any bad interactions with experiences, even yourself as candidates, through a hiring process?
You're on mute there.
You're on mute, Kevin. Still on mute. Over to Kunal.
I mean, I can jump in. But yeah, the candidate experience. So, I mean, this is a funny topic for me, coming from me. I'm not an advertisement. I'm definitely not one of those people, but I work in a company right now, and I've been working in the recruitment technology space for many years, and candidate experience is just relentlessly more important these days. Candidate experience is a huge topic, whether you're small, whether you're large as an organization. The one key thing that I would always drive home here is just be a human to these folks that are applying to your company, right? They are applying to you for any number of reasons, right? It could be that they have children and they have just lost their job and they've got kids and they got mouths to feed, right? And they might sound desperate, for sure, probably because they are, right? And there's others that are crazy skilled and may not be in touch with you, right? But you can easily say, hey, it was a fantastic conversation we had. I actually learned a lot from that interaction with you today. So, hey, no matter which way and direction this goes, it was a pleasure speaking with you today. That's not going to say anything to the candidate. You don't have to worry about saying anything to candidate about hinting that you're going to hire them or not going to hire them, right? It's really just about being a human back to them. And you can do this over email. You don't have to have some, wicked system like JobFight to do that for you, or telemetry, I should say, in that sense. But you don't need all solutions like that to do that. Everyone's got access to emails and text these days, right?
It's funny because in all these sales groups and forums and events that we sit in, they talk about empathy when you're trying to prospect, and it's sometimes forgotten when you're hiring somebody to come work for you, which is bizarre. You're prospecting somebody you want to be
totally bizarre.
But you want somebody to come work with you and join your family, really, now that we're at home every day and people are seeing what our family life is like, and you forget about empathy. Kevin, is your mic back on? Because I got one for you. No, wait, we're still muted. So the next question, actually, if you get it on in time, is actually around the cost of a bad hire. How do you guys view the cost of a bad hire from, whether it's a financial standpoint, a cultural standpoint? Like, how does that impact organizations that you've been part of or that you've been working with?
I mean, it can poison the well so fast, right? Like, and I think it's one of those where you really know if someone is a bad hire, like if something is so egregious and something is so obvious that it's bad within like the first 2 weeks, I would say. Mm-hmm. Performance wise, I'd say like, you give someone at least 30, 60 days to kind of get adjusted and you kind of know what you need to work on. But if someone's a bad hire, I guess it's how you're defining what's bad. But, those types of folks that just are not, team players or collaborative or value adds, you have to pretty quickly. Because if not, then it demotivates the rest of the team. You start creating these silos. You remove focus from, what the goals really are. So we really encourage people, like, don't wait 30 days to do that first check-in. Like, ask someone how their first week is going and ask the rest of the team how the first week is going, and really, dig in. I think it's better to really test for these things early versus wait for that 90-day check-in.
And Kunal, I know we'll probably talk about that. Like, how do you avoid that hire that doesn't make it 90 days? I want to talk to you about that in the process, identifying talent later, because when all the time you invest in that interview process, then you hire somebody that doesn't work out 30, 60, 90 days, like, that's no good. And from a sales,
something's broken in the process.
Yeah,
totally.
something. And how far does it put you back from like a sales target standpoint at the enterprise level when it takes 7, 8, 9 months to ramp somebody up? Like, your sales targets are behind for a year. Kevin, do we have you back?
Yeah, are we working?
That's what you were going to say, right?
Yay!
Yes.
Okay,
we're back. Sorry about that. So yeah, Chris, I know you and I've talked about this a lot, right? But I think that there is the cost of a bad hire from, well, what if you hired somebody good in the production they could have, and you're thinking about leads going to this person or demos or, whatever, like the conversions you lost from like a really good person. So you can start to quantify it from a revenue perspective for sure. But I think the other part that Brianna, you mentioned is, it has such a bad impact on your top performers, right? Like you bring somebody, maybe they're just lazy. They're not into it. And that does, have an effect on the rest of the team. And so you may see your top performers just, pulling back a little bit because the bar's not that high. Or the worst part is if they start to look at leadership and be like, what are you hiring for? Like, you didn't see this, and they start to lose confidence in the decision-making. And so, yes, there's massive impacts from like a revenue implication, a culture perspective. And that's why at Global Web Index, we put together a culture panel as well. So we actually have specific people from different departments, different seniorities, super diverse group that were actually looking at specific behavioral questions. And really, we put a lot of focus on our cultural interviewing. So this way we know from that perspective, we're bringing good people into the business, because to your point, you're really making them a part of your work family. Like, you spend a ton of time with these people. You just want to be surrounded by really good, positive people that'll make everyone around you better, not worse. So it can be very, very costly and timely.
The quick fire surprise question that I promised I wouldn't ask a surprise question, but all three of you, your quick answer: at what stage do you interview for culture?
Day one, like the first 30 seconds. It's there. To me, it's just so obvious if someone, and it depends how you define your culture, right? Like, culture is not, am I going to grab a beer with this person? I cringe when I hear that. That's not how you define culture. And that's why all of these tech companies are blowing up left and right that have defined it that way, right? And so it's like, what is our moral compass and what are our brand values? What are our culture values? A lot of our companies use that in their interview. And so it starts with the very first interview is, a lot of the questions aren't, can you do the job? It's weaving in the actual brand values and culture values into the questions.
In terms of, the companies blowing up because maybe they hired wrong, it kind of, we've lived in this world of hypergrowth the last few years. Like, it's a reality that there has been pressure from investors. And I know this might be, maybe Kevin will talk about a previous role that you worked in, or, but there are investor goals. I mean, investors invest to hit targets, and lots of those targets and metrics are built off of hires. So like, as hiring managers, Kunal and Kevin, like, have you felt pressure, maybe not directly from investors, but from the executive team to hit hiring goals? And Brianna, to put back to you, do you feel like sometimes those are expectations when you guys go into a company and say, yes, you're going to hit these hiring goals? And does that blow things up sometimes? That's the tough question.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, right? It's on one hand, you have to be able to manage the conversation about adding a body does not mean adding X dollars of revenue, right? We have to be able to have that human conversation with an investor or with a senior leadership team person, right? And say there's this concept, especially in revenue teams, where there's this concept called ramp, right? And you have to take that into account, and that's a very basic thing, right? An employee to become effective, especially on the revenue side of things, in order to become effective, in order to help you hit the targets that you have for the year, they will take time to do that, especially on the new hire side. I think from the culture standpoint, there is, it is really important to hire for culture. I do completely agree. For culture, immediately is important. And the thing that, you should be able to tease out during the interview process is the toxic ones. Those are the ones you really need to make sure. I mean, on a scale perspective, someone who's not toxic but isn't a perfect culture fit can be okay. Like a medium culture fit can be okay for you, depending how large your organization is. But a toxic person will not be okay. So that's got to be teased out very early.
How do you manage those expectations back up to your, the executive team, the C-suite, the board? I mean, how do you tell them, like, hey, listen, we have guidelines and we're not going to flex on them just to meet body goals?
I've always used data. I think for me, you have to be able to see whether, you're seeing trends within your pipeline generation, you're seeing trends within quota attainment across your team. Like, you have to be able to use data to make these types of decisions. We've all seen the really bad end of the movie of just throwing bodies at a target. Like, it just does not work. And so for me, it's like, take the emotion out of it, take the storytelling out of it, like really look at specific data and metrics that everyone can align on and agree on to help guide those decisions and make those decisions.
Do you guys use scorecards now?
Yes.
Kunal, you guys use scorecards, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, scorecarding concept in both hiring, but also in general performance of your team are both really important, right? Measuring your team, your existing team that you have today on what, how they're hitting their quotas or how they're hitting their targets is your best case piece of information that Kevin is alluding to here on data on how the next person is going to do, right? And you should bring that down also slightly to manage expectations, right? And if they knock it out of the park, great. If they don't, at least you were in line and said, look, they took longer to ramp. From a recruiting scorecarding perspective, man, I've done this for years before I even recognized what an applicant tracking system really did. But I put down in a spreadsheet, and again, real scrappy, just put down into a spreadsheet what are my 5 key things that I think as a leader we need on this team, and This is not a job description. This is the 5 key things that I needed. And I defined it explicitly for everyone else that was going to interview the candidate. And then I put every candidate into a scorecard. I rated them from 1 to 5 for each of those categories. And guess who won? The one with the highest points, right? The candidate with the highest points got the offer letter. And guess how it worked out? When we were all aligned on those 5 key things, it worked out very, very well. RollPoint scaled a very small company for many years, and ended up selling off on a pretty substantial valuation.
Brianna, what about you advising like your portfolio companies and technologies, processes? I mean, when you go in, I'm sure every company's different in their hiring process and their stage. Some are great, some are, oh gosh, we got to come help fix this. Like, what would you recommend companies do, or hiring managers?
So I mean, the most frustrating piece of where I sit is between both the company and the investment side, right? And so when I hear the frustration of, we have to grow, we have to hire these teams quickly because we have the investor demands, because we have, now we're in Series C and we have 10 different VCs around the table, all asking for different KPIs, and one wants to grow, one wants to aim for profitability. It's like, how, if they're not aligned, how are we supposed to align, right? And then what do we deliver on? And then, we're in a board meeting, and the head of HR is getting pulled in saying, well, you're behind on hiring, you're behind on diversity, what's the issue? And it's like, well, you told us you want to focus on growing, right? And so there's always a trade-off. And I think right now more than ever, we all have a stage and a microphone to just like say, hi, we're hitting the pause button to get this stuff right. And if we want, if we're going to come out and make a big statement about hiring a more diverse culture, then we have to look from the top down, what our benefits are, what we're offering on the way in, what our recruiting panel looks like, removing all of the bias from the job specs, holding the roles open longer to find a diverse hire, and have the right process. And if that means maybe some of our sales goals are stalling because we have to set up all of this foundation, in the end, we're going to have a better team and we're going to win. So that's the trade-off. Are we all aligned on that? And I think empowering, from our side, empowering our companies to be able to share that with them and know, hey, we're aligned. We want you guys to hire the best teams and the most diverse, high-performing teams. We get it. Like, if we see numbers that don't reflect like the goal because you're hiring like killer people, then let's talk about that. And I think we have to openly talk about that a little bit more. So, Kunal and Kevin, I hear it on both sides. I totally get it. As far as processes, it's coming in and making sure that people have actually sit down and have feedback loops. I can't tell you how many times, I get feedback from a million different emails and I'm like, did you all talk in a room about this? Who's moderating that? I think that's a big piece also of where a lot of bias comes out. It's like, oh, that person wasn't that smart. What does that mean? What does that actually mean? Like, no one's taking a test in an interview. So like, what did that person say that made you think that they weren't smart? And how do you define smart for this role? What Kunal was saying is, if someone isn't a culture fit today, that's okay. And I think that's the difference between culture fit and culture add, right? Like, we've had a ton of companies that everybody looks the same around the same table. They pound their fists. They're all like, if you look at like the DISC report, they're all Ds, or the color insights, they're all reds. And I have to push entrepreneurs and say, do you want to create the space to have a blue, to have a green, to have a yellow, to have an IS, to have an SC, like using all of these different assessment tools. So I'm a big proponent of assessment tools because it puts language to the style of communication you want to hire for. And it's like, if you all are in this quadrant, then you're never going to actually have any sort of opportunity to hire anyone else who doesn't look like you. So you have to also hire for potential culture and really sussing out, like, do we all want to think the same and look the same when we grow up? No, because cultures who aren't diverse don't win. And really pushing people to think, like, what is a culture fit? And so I'm a proponent of using assessments early on and getting people up to speed on that. Building the right ATS that has the right candidate experience, and then also allows you to create those scorecards on the back end. And then also making sure you have a performance management tool in place day one as well. Like, I don't care how many people you are, you need a performance management tool, because you have to look back on the data to figure out, what does success actually mean? What does it look like here? And be able to figure out, like, where do we want to go and track our goals. All of that has to be built in and tracked.
Brianna, you said assessment tools, and they drive me as an external recruiter absolutely insane. And I think they're really good, but I've almost always seen them used at the wrong time. They, like, these assessment
timing
tools,
is everything.
Yeah, these disc profiles should be taken and help drive how the interview goes. I've literally had a hiring manager not hire a VP of sales because she said he was too yellow.
Yes. And that it's a coaching tool. It's not should we hire this person? So they're using it the wrong way. And actually illegally. So you can't not make a hire
because of their assessment it was a little bizarre. But you mentioned diversity. Diversity is like top of everyone's mind right now. How hard is it to hire for diversity? I mean, being hiring managers, like, do you see a good flow of diversity candidates? Have you challenged your recruitment teams for that right now? I mean, what are your thoughts on diversity hiring?
Yeah, I mean, working with so many customers in this space, upwards of 1,200 customers in this space, diversity is basically the top of everyone's agenda, top of everyone's board meeting, right? Every investor is interested in how their portfolio companies are reacting to diversity and inclusion right now. I think we have lots of technology out there that allows us to tell a good story around how we're empowering diversity and inclusion in the candidate experience and recruitment experience. But I genuinely believe there needs to be a lot more around the actual decision time. Because it's really easy to find all the applicants you want that look great on a resume, and you can remove all the unconscious bias from resumes these days. We've got tools for that. Other companies have tools for that. But presenting a resume to someone is not going to be the end-all decision there. And I think there is going to be a lot of education that's necessary to teach hiring managers what the benefits are to them to focus on diversity and inclusion in their hiring practices and final decision making. And scorecards can help; they really can. Right? Like, you're actually having to document and be real with yourself around, these are my 5 criteria that I'm hiring for. Does this person tick all those boxes? If they don't, okay, well, at least you have something to back up why they don't, right? But when you've got a team of people interviewing that same person,
you overcome the "can I go get a beer with them" qualification a bit. If they score all, at that point, you're a silly hiring manager. If you're just trying to hire somebody you can go get a beer with, and maybe you just need to get out more on the weekends and get more friends or something like that.
It goes even beyond a scorecard, though, too. Like, you have to start with your own people in your backyard. Like, are you ready to make a diversity hire? Will this person even feel like they belong on day one? Like, if your team hasn't out loud said the word Black, like, then hiring a Black person is going to be really hard. So it's good to also just do a gut check of, do we even have the right people in place today that can foster a diverse community, and can, when we actually make some of these hires, will they feel like they belong? Going back to candidate experience, you can't have an entire interview process, and because you're recruiting a woman, put a bunch of women in front of her, and then that first week there aren't any women that she's actually working with. You put, the EA, the head of HR, and the director of marketing, and she's a salesperson, then what happens? And so I think it's being able to figure out also, what can you do before you suddenly turn the light on? I mean, we're having so many companies come out and say, we're going to hire 50% more women and more people of color next year. And it's like, well, if you do the math, like, are you firing a bunch of people then? Because the backing into the math, like, you don't actually have this amount of headcount, right? And so being able to actually make actionable goals is something I really encourage our companies. Like, don't go out and make a statement for the sake of marketing. Do it because it's something that you really care about. Had a call the other day with a company that was describing that they wanted to add a person of color to their board, and I asked them why, and just simply like, what's your story? Why is it important now? Because right now candidates are frustrated. They have been Black, brown, any color. They've been all of these races for years, and now they're getting a phone call because everyone decided to wake up after 400 years. So it's one of those things too, where we have to, going back to the candidate experience, we have to remember that these incredible people have been incredible and have had fantastic careers. We just weren't making the effort to be intentional to go out and find them. They've always been there. Yeah. And so I think also remembering that we have a lot of people coming from different journeys, different backgrounds, and we all have to kind of be on the same path. And that inclusivity piece is just as important as making sure we have diverse pipelines. If people day one don't feel like they belong, that's a huge, huge loss. And so doing the homework to make sure your teams have anti-racism training, not just unconscious bias training, straight up anti-racism training. The things that people are not realizing what they're saying and doing, these microaggressions, there's so many different things that weave into being able to actually recruit a diverse workforce. So I think it goes beyond even like trying to figure out what we're hiring for. It's like, are we even going to offer a great experience when we do make that hire?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it's networking time now, and I want everyone to go be able to socialize with other people outside of in their household. But one last tidbit before we go into networking, and if you want to talk to these panelists more and join the conversation, they'll be in their breakout rooms starting in 20 minutes. But what's one book, podcast, insight, resource? We know the Addicted to Growth show is a great podcast if you want to learn about growing and revenue. But what's something that each one of you could recommend for everyone? And Yoram, I did steal this question from you if you're out there, so sorry.
Yeah, I don't want to do a shameless plug, but yeah, check out the podcast because it has been probably the most inspirational experience for me. Just because I've been able to speak to so many people, ask so many questions, and really be a sponge and learn. So just the experience, not even listening to it, but the experience of it has been really, really, again, inspirational. And I've learned a lot and grown a lot because it was really uncomfortable at first. So that's just been great. But I think it's just the people I've met along the way. Like I've met a lot of inspirational people that I can now, chat with, ask questions to, all of that. So I think it's not a very specific answer to your question, Chris, but I think it's just the people that I'm meeting along the way right now have been a huge inspiration to me, which are people I'm meeting through the podcast.
If you want to get pumped up in the morning, listen to Kevin's chat with Larry Long. We hope to have him on this event series next month, but it's a good way to start your day in the morning.
He does midweek motivation videos. He posts on LinkedIn, so check those out there. They'll get you going.
Brianna, what do we got?
So it's funny because I used to commute in total 3 hours every single day. So my reading list was insane, and my podcast list was insane. Now I'm spending that time. All of these books behind me are all baby books and anti-racism books and leadership books. So it's a little different. But I'd say right now, rereading the 5 love languages has been, I just think it's one of those things where, people look at it for relationships, but it's so helpful when it comes to motivating and understanding and appreciating people and teams. So it's actually one of my favorite go-tos that I reread all the time, just to kind of help reset the mind of just how to motivate and lead and communicate with people who don't think like you, and understanding what their love language is so that you can show up for them and help them and motivate them. So that's where I've been spending a lot of time, and a lot of Peloton listening and meditation.
There you go. And Kunal, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I have to do two plugs here, but and sorry about that, but two two books. They're not plugs. One is a book that's actually similar to the one Brianna just mentioned right now, but it's called Nonviolent Communication, and that sounds like a horrific title for a book for all those who have never heard of it. And it actually is a horrific title for a book. That's my opinion. But the book is really, really eye-opening on how to communicate with others in relationships in general. Look, we're in sales, right? And if you're not a salesperson directly on the line today or leading a sales team, every single day of our life is something to do with relationships and sales, right? This book is really about how to enhance your communication, to enhance the relationships, both for yourself and for the other people that you're actually having a relationship with. So strongly recommend that book. And this might date me a little bit, but there's this book written by David Allen called Getting Things Done, which has genuinely made me a incredibly more organized person and allowed me to turbocharge when necessary for my direct reports and my management teams. It keeps me organized and keeps my my head straight so that I can actually be effective for my teams here. It's made me believe a lot in process to build an effective team.
Awesome. Well, everyone, go enjoy some networking. Maybe grab a drink to get in front of a person for the first time in a long time. We're going to jump back into the breakout rooms at 6:40, where you can jump on, participate, ask this awesome panel any questions you have around hiring, even if it's outside the subject of the panel rooms a bit. So hope to see you networking and back in the breakout room shortly, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris.
And just click on the left where it says networking right there. Sorry.